A ketogenic diet has largely neutral or detrimental effects on athletic performance compared to a diet higher in carbohydrates and lower in fat.
Makes sense.
Despite achieving significantly elevated levels of fat oxidation during exercise at about 1.5 grams per minute. Wow.
That's a lot.
Yeah. So,
but they said it's neutral or detrimental to performance. Right. That makes sense.
And so again, we are talking about the International Society of Sports Nutrition. We're not talking, this isn't the Board of Clinical Nutrition. This is a sporting context.
Right.
And so
run faster, jump higher. You probably won't if you're in ketosis.
Right. And there's even a point to distinguish there that if you're a more on the recreational end of the spectrum of endurance athletics, that maybe I would wager to say that that a diet like this might even be less detrimental than if you were somebody who's like at the top end running ultra marathons and your income and pride depends on running it in 2 minutes less or whatever.
Right,
So
right.
Number 4, the endurance effects of a ketogenic diet may be influenced by both training status and duration of the dietary intervention, but further research is necessary to elucidate these possibilities. All studies involving elite athletes showed a performance decrement from a ketogenic diet, all lasting 6 weeks or less. Of the 2 studies lasting more than 6 weeks, only one reported a statistically significant benefit of a ketogenic diet. So I think that kind of said what we just said.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me at all. Even having loved being in ketosis, it does not surprise me in the slightest that a performance athlete would see a decline in their performance in ketosis, especially for a long period of time.
Yep.
Makes sense.
Number 5.
Well, this is fun.
A ketogenic diet tends to have similar effects on maximal strength or strength gains from a resistance training program compared to a diet higher in carbohydrates. However, a minority of studies show superior effects of non-ketogenic comparators.
Okay, so again, it's neutral or slight decrement, but not a big deal either way. Okay,
but I think it's always good to just quickly step outside the narrow focus that we were in for just a moment. One of my friends sent me a podcast talking about this study. Of course, it was a Simon Hill podcast, who, in my estimation, is one of the best in the business. But the study that they talked about, which and from other individuals has gotten some hype. It's titled "Dietary Protein Intake in Midlife in Relation to Healthy Aging: Results from the Prospective Nurses Health Cohort Study." So they looked at like 3,300 individuals, and they had all these different ways to connect protein intake with healthy aging, essentially. And just to read the conclusion of the abstract here: dietary protein, especially plant protein in midlife, is associated with higher odds of healthy aging with several domains of positive health status in a large cohort of female nurses. And so, again, what are we, just like we're the abstract people, we're just just hitting people with headlines and abstracts, but those guys can explain it better than I could. So you should go listen to it. But my point is, you listen to or you read a position statement on the ketogenic diet, which I think gave a pretty fair assessment of the positives and the negatives and how it affects performance mainly. And then you look at something like this on the flip side, theoretically, of something like healthy aging. And now this is not apples to apples. We're not talking about the ketogenic diet, but we are talking about a certain type of protein over the lifespan that's being consumed more than others. I mean, so in looking at what's commonly associated with a ketogenic dietary pattern, for most people, it is a higher percentage of animal proteins. Well, on the flip side, you look at this healthy aging study, which I think the vast majority of people care more about healthy aging than what's their ultra marathon endurance time.
Sure.
We see a bias towards consuming higher amounts of plant protein. And so I just think there's more of these arrows pointing us away from diets like a ketogenic diet high in animal proteins.
Yeah.
A carnivore-like diet that's high in animal proteins. Something that's a little more varied, a little more dispersed, like we often talk about. But again, when you see all these arrows, not necessarily saying the same thing, pointing at the same thing, but just kind of like leaning in the same direction, I just think you have to be careful.